My name is Matthew Bowes. I own Pacific Cascade Electric. I know a couple of you in here, but not many. A little bit about myself. I've been an electrician for 17 years. I just started my company last year, but most recently, before I started my company, I was actually working for Cupertino Electric, doing utility scale solar projects. I was a superintendent. So I spent all of my adult life in construction management and electrical construction. But I'm here to talk to you today about site preparation for EV chargers. There's some things that you should look out for. First and foremost, hiring your contractor. There's EVITP is the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program. Sorry, I don't have any slides. But they have a website, it's evitp.org. And there's a list of contractors on there in every area that's approved through the EVITP that shows that they have the accreditation and the skills and knowledge to work with EV chargers. And then each individual manufacturer usually has their own training courses, like ChargePoint has certifications you can get, Tesla, Ford, all of them have their own individual certifications. So it's always good to make sure that your contractor has the certification for the specific charger you want. And if they're EVITP certified, it's just an extra guarantee that they're gonna know what they're getting themselves into. The next thing you need to look at is the available capacity of your service to make sure that you have the ability to add an EV charger on your system. And if not, you're gonna either need to upgrade or add an additional system separately for the EV chargers. And that your contractor should be able to help you with. It's another discussion you need to get the utility company involved in, because lately Pacific Power specifically hasn't had availability to add onto the grid. So like we have a commercial project at a dealership here in Bend, and we had to delay it for a year because they don't have enough capacity on the grid to add the chargers. So we had to push it out. So timeline wise, that's something you want to get done early, as well as knowing what equipment you're going to use, because there's a lot of long lead times for equipment, for chargers themselves and for service equipment for your electrical system. Some equipment's out over a year. So the earlier you can order it, the better prepared you'll be. A lot of ChargePoint specifically requires a network study for their systems to make sure that you have a good enough signal so that the system can communicate. If it's attaching directly to a building, then usually your Wi-Fi is sufficient. But if it's in a remote area, they need to do a network study to make sure that it can communicate, especially if you're going to be using it for public use and allowing people to charge their cars off of your equipment. It's a requirement by ChargePoint specifically, but other manufacturers probably require it also. Another thing to look at is any additional work that's going to be required to install your system, like excavation, concrete pads. The parking stalls are roughly the same size as an ADA stall for handicap. So you want to make sure that you have enough space and clearance in front of the chargers. Make sure that you budget for all of the work, not just the charger itself. That's a lot of times I run into customers that they have a budget for the charger and they install the charger, but they don't know that there's other work involved to be able to adequately use the charger, and they don't prepare their budget for that. Any questions? I'm not very good at public speaking, so yes?
So with the availability on the grid?
Yes.
Oh, in case we're recording, do you mind speaking?
So how you mentioned with Pacific Power, sometimes on the grid, there's not availability to add into your service.
Yes.
Have you heard of that in other service territories or just Pacific Power?
CEC actually is also running into issues with upgrading their system. So I have an ADU that we just built out in Deschutes County outside of Bend, and they weren't able to tie into their grid for like 4 months because they had to do some upgrades. So it's specifically in Bend, the infrastructure is growing so fast and the grid wasn't built to handle as many people and businesses as we have here. So they're way behind. But it is other places also, and other companies other than Pacific Power. Just that's the biggest impact that I've seen so far. Go on. Anyone else?
Any other questions? Okay, oh, one more.
Dang it.
Are you putting these chargers in yourself, your company?
Yes.
So what sort of businesses, or who's putting them in? I'm just curious, the demographic of
So I've had real estate companies reach out and they want to put them in their parking lot at their office building. I'm actually working with Diane on a project for Madras School District. Lithia dealership in Bend, we did a project out there. It's everyone, especially dealerships are pushing the EV charger or EV cars. So they're putting the chargers in to kind of solidify the whole EV charging movement. Really, it's across the board. Everyone's kind of trying to push EV. Oh, Renee at the Giving Plate, we installed a charger at her office warehouse.
Are all these level 2s then, or?
Yeah, most of them are level 2s. A couple of them are level 3 DC fast chargers. Those are a lot more expensive and they have a lot larger power requirement. That's where we've been mostly running into the issues with the grid is when we go to level 3 chargers. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Oh, he's got it.
Hi. If you are kind of speccing or building out a project, this is going to be a leading question.
Go for it.
How different or how much easier is your job if somebody planned ahead and put conduit in the ground? How much of a project complexity or cost could be solved with panel capacity and conduit?
So if it's correct, that saves a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of planning, because digging up an asphalt parking lot is kind of a pain. So if it was already done ahead of time, that would save a lot of work, a lot of time for the project timeline. Does that kind of answer your question, or? Yeah.
Do you see people doing that incorrectly?
Yes, regularly. So, unfortunately, not all contractors are created equal, and so contractors that kind of specialize in this have a little more foresight, and there's other factors that you have to take into account than just standard electrical procedures. So there's a lot of mistakes that are made. I think you had a question? So I like silly.
Anyway,
Okay.
it kind of recently, there's been some power outages in Bend, like 2 in the last 6 months. And they always blame it on squirrels. And I'm wondering if that's a capacity issue or if there really is a squirrel problem.
So I'm sure there are squirrels. I mean, I've seen birds and squirrels and rodents cause power outages because they get into the substation, they crawl into places they shouldn't, and they get fried, and then they have to shut the power down to remove them. But I don't know if the past couple are because of that or not. But I know there's constant upgrades that they're doing right now to the substations and the grid in general because they need to increase capacity across the board. So, go ahead.
Would you talk a little more about that grid capacity issue?
Yeah, would you talk a little more about the grid capacity issue? Is it transmission or is it actual getting the capacity?
So that would be more a Pacific Power question or CEC, but from my understanding, it's the individual substations are not built big enough to handle that load. And I'm sure that there is some transmission line issues that we need to increase the power there also, but I know that there's solar going in for utility scale that's helping with that demand, but a lot of those seem to be for large customers like Facebook and Apple. I know they're building their own substations and tying PV into that, but transmission lines will need to be upgraded, substations need to be upgraded, but I think they were kind of ahead of the game on the transmission line, so that's not as big. But the individual substations here in town specifically are needing to be upgraded or additional built.
So it could be something, since it's a substation, it could be this development over here might be not yet having to deal with that, and then just across town, they are.
Yes.
Okay.
For sure.
And how about Prineville? Because I heard something related of happening in Prineville.
So Prineville and Bend are the two biggest issues I've run into. Sisters is, I don't even know if they're Pacific Power and Sisters, but yeah, CEC. Madras, I haven't had any issues with Pacific Power as far as grid capacity. Lapine is Midstate Electric, and I haven't had any issues down there. But Bentonville specifically is where I've run into the most issues. Does that answer your question? Okay, yeah.